Hi everyone, this is Jay West, and the TV show today is called Directions. And Directions is normally an interview show where I interview people that have gone through specific things in their life or are going through something, maybe the loss of a job or maybe a promotion, financial setback or a blessing, something medical in their family or relational, and just stuff that causes direction changes and how to navigate those things. And last time I was on was part one of my 46 years in ministry, and so I'm picking up in the middle. And so if you didn't watch the first one, it won't make a lot of sense, but maybe it will make a little bit of sense for you. Anyway, I got to about 1983, 1984, somewhere in there, and I was in Charleston, South Carolina. And I remember that I shared with you that Christmas was a tough Christmas. My uncle died on the 27th. My grandmother died on the 31st, and it was announced that my dad had a brain tumor. And so we were trying to get to California to be with my dad because they gave him 18 months to live. And that's a directional change. When you know that your parents have not long to live, you want to be with them. And we're in South Carolina. We're about as far away as we can get in the 48 United States. And so anyway, we were trying to get to California. It wasn't working. We met this guy in Texas, and he was a pastor, and he didn't know anything, but he wanted me to come work for him at his church. And later on, a job opened up for my previous wife at that time, and she's no longer living now, but for her to go and be on staff as a teacher there. And so we ended up moving to a place called Sugar Land, Texas. The Imperial Sugar Company is based there. And so we moved there, and that's just outside of Houston. It's a Houston suburb, and stayed 9 years. And that was a great experience for me in many ways. I grew in my faith. Things that I needed to deal with personally were dealt with. Growth patterns and deficiencies, and just life in general, stuff that you just walk through and go through. And it was a season where I was also sick with an incurable disease called irritable bowel syndrome, and there's no known cure. And the doctors told me you can't get well. And they said it's not a disease that will kill you, but simultaneously you just won't get well, and you're going to have the symptoms all your life. And my symptoms my number one symptom was pain, like somebody was drilling their way out of my gut, out of my stomach with a sharp 2-inch knife. I would literally wake myself up at night crying almost every night, and just the pain was so debilitating and unmanageable in many ways. But fortunately, Jesus didn't get the memo that I would never get well, because on June 1st, 1991, it went away and never came back. And same time, we were trying to have children, and that's another story, and I won't go into all that, because I've shared that testimony before, but our son was born that year as well, in 1991, and so that was a good year for us. And then 2.5 years later, I got an offer to go pastor a church in Kansas, and that's why I'm wearing my pastor hat today, kind of shifting gears from being on staff in a church to becoming a pastor. And I was in a pastoral role in Houston. Don't get me wrong, I was preaching a lot and ministering, but actually being the senior pastor of a small little church in rural Kansas, a little town called Hugoton. Hugoton has one of the largest natural gas reserves in the United States outside of Alaska. And it's just above the panhandle of Oklahoma. And it was a new experience for me to go to a very rural church in a rural town. I had been in the suburbs all my life, growing up in San Diego, spending 9 years in Houston, fourth largest city in the United States. And we go to this little tiny town of 1,500. I kiddingly say, we started praying for businesses to come in. We prayed our McDonald's in, but it was the tiniest, smallest little McDonald's you've ever seen in your life. And I kiddingly say, you couldn't get a Big Mac there. You could only get a Little Mac. And, it was just a tiny place. And, but we watched the town grow, and our little church grew. When we got there, there was 13 people, and, not significant growth, not just off the chart kind of growth, but we got up to about 70 or 80 when I left 4 years later, which is pretty good in a little town that already had 15 churches. We were the only church that didn't have a building. And so people were reluctant, buy a building. We rented a space, but we didn't have our own space. And they're always thinking, well, you want us to come, so you want to help you build a building. I said, no, I just want to build the kingdom. But it was okay. Had a great experience and had a lot of farmers in my church and got to learn how to farm. I grew up knowing about citrus trees in California and how to pick and grow citrus and oranges and lemons and so on, tangerines, grapefruit. But didn't know much about planting and corn and wheat and soybeans and that kind of stuff. And winter wheat also, it's warm enough there to grow 2 crops of wheat. And it's way out in the sticks. Our closest airport was Amarillo, Texas, 3.5 hours away, or Wichita, which is 4.5 hours away. You know, so you spend a better part of a day just getting to the airport when you're going to fly somewhere. So you normally would drive half a day and then spend the night and catch an early morning flight and same coming home. And so it's just a different lifestyle than it is living in the suburbs. But have good friends in that town to this day, and stayed there 4 years and left in around 97 or so, and 1997. That's not 1897, but 1997. I am old, but not that old. And then we moved to Dallas, Texas, and long story short, started pastoring a Southern Baptist church. It was open to the Holy Spirit. So now I've been in a Lutheran church, independent, charismatic, rural church, Lutheran church, Baptist church, just a lot of different things. And all this was kind of setting the tone for me to start traveling. I need to go back to Kansas for a moment. Just in Kansas, our overseers were in Columbus, Ohio, and they came to see us. They liked what they heard, and they invited me to come speak in Ohio for 2 weeks. And so I traveled around Ohio, and they put me in church after church after church after church after church. And that's kind of what launched my idea, my concept, the enjoyment of traveling and speaking at churches. Even today, as I'm getting back and doing the show, I just got back from Wisconsin. I was in northern Wisconsin up by Lake Superior. Flew all the way up to Duluth, Minnesota, drove over to Superior, and then drove down just like 20 miles to this little town, Solon Springs. We thought the town in Kansas was small at 1,500, 2,000. This little town only had 600. Really a good church. So I just enjoy traveling. It's going around the country and speaking and ministering. And, you know, this year just having been in all sorts of places. Charleston, South Carolina, Oregon, Portland, Oregon, Salem, Oregon, Washington, D.C. multiple times, the Minneapolis area, Denver, San Diego. I've been on 16 ministry trips this year, and it's just been a blessing. Anyway, that all got started in Kansas, and you know, these are all directional changes for me because I was just a good little Lutheran boy raised in Southern California, and went to a Lutheran school, and now my eyes are getting bigger and my world is getting bigger, and looking out at the Bible, it's full of vision and activity and knowledge about the future, and people are always wanting to know what's coming up, but I kind of tend to this what's going on rather than what's coming up. Anyway, I don't know how I got on that, so sorry to push back. But then in Dallas, just ministered there, but the Lord had a call in our life to come to Omaha. And when we were in Kansas, I came up to Omaha once, multiple times. Our regional meetings were also in Omaha, Nebraska, right here where we're filming this. And it was a blessing to come up here, and I met lots of people, and I went to a prayer meeting one day, and a pastor prophesied over me, and he said, someday you're going to live in Omaha. I know who he was, so I asked God for a Bible verse, and I got one out of the Bible, Jeremiah 7:7. It just says, I shall cause you to dwell in this place. I looked it up, and that's what it said. I was like, wow. Okay, I got that word in 1995, but it took 5 years for it to happen. Moved here in 2000, July 25th of 2000. That's another story, another day. But came here to help an inner city Christian school in the area, be their principal. My wife was going to be on staff. Our son was going to be in the school, and they wanted me to restart their spirit-filled services. This is another Lutheran church and school. What they didn't tell me was that they were having major financial problems, and they were like nearly $100,000 behind. And so we got here, and through a strange set of circumstances I won't go into, but the school ended up closing, and so now we don't have any jobs. We moved here with the security of having jobs for my wife and I, and there was like 17 people on staff. We had a high school, we had a preschool, kindergarten through high school, and everybody lost their job on the same day, but we were the only couple on staff, so we both lost our jobs on the same day. And my wife had to get recertified in the state of Nebraska to teach at Bellevue Christian Academy here in the area, and at that point I just put my name out to travel. I'd done it on a limited basis, you know, when I was in Kansas, and And it was just a good time, a season that I enjoyed. And so I put my name out to travel, speak at other churches. And in 2001, I went to 12 churches. Now, 12 churches doesn't make you a lot of money. So how'd you live? You might ask, how'd you live? And my wife's in college, and we're homeschooling our son, and I'm got limited traveling engagements. But what had happened was when we were in Dallas, the rent house that we had, we bought it, and we bought it at a very low price, and 1 year later sold it when we moved here at a very high price. And so we had all that equity to live on. And some people said to me, they said, "Oh, Jay, I'm so sorry you're having to spend your equity from your house." I said, "Hey, it's in the savings account. That's a blessing. And savings is just God's provision in advance." Savings is God's provision in advance. I want you to think about that for a minute. And it's better than taking a cash advance or getting an advance on your credit card and paying high interest rates and so on. And so we were able to make it. And the first year, like I said, I went to 12 churches. And it was just me and God. I didn't have a cell phone. I wasn't tax exempt. I hadn't written any books yet. I didn't have any CDs or any teachings. We didn't even have podcasts yet and online messages like we do now. And so it was just me and God and recommendations and referrals. And God just opened up doors for me. It was amazing. And so that second year, I went to 50 churches. It just really jumped. And the third year, I went to 125 churches. And some of these were local as well. The doors began to open up locally here. And over the years now, I'm in my 26th year here in Omaha, and I've been in 156 churches locally, most of them repeatedly. So when you multiply the repeated times, because several churches were multiple times, right around 800 churches, 800 different times I've gotten to minister here in the Omaha Metroplex area. And then nationwide, I've been right at 2,200 churches in 66 different denominations. Can you believe that? 66. Some people said, I didn't know there were 66 denominations. Well, there's a whole lot more than that, unfortunately. But yeah, I've been to 66, from Catholic to Black Pentecostal and Hispanic and French and Korean and Chinese and a few others that I don't even remember at the moment. Now, obviously, those are nationalities and not denominations, but they have their own denominations within their nationality. Anyway, and just to get invited as a Protestant to speak in the Catholic Church. And here locally, I was helped a black church that burned to the ground, and I helped the pastor rebuild his church and get a new church. And he had a conference called Out of the Ashes, and they had a poster, if you can imagine this poster, and it was for 8 nights in a row, and all the way around were all the pastors that were speaking, and they were all black, and then I was in the middle. And it was just such an honor. And then he also had me in on Martin Luther King weekend. If you can imagine that, just being invited. But I love the cultures, I love the diversity, and I love it when we work together, love each other, care for each other. And I try to do that as best as I can and help others. It doesn't matter to me what color your skin is, or what your nationality is, or how thick your accent is, or how much you know about the Bible or don't know about the Bible. I just want to serve, want to help, want to be a blessing, encourage. And even to this day, I often go to places entirely for free. I'll pay the bill. It's not like I'm rich, I'm not. But God will provide me the airfare, and I'll be able to go help a small church that's struggling. Did one earlier this year in Sacramento, California. Flew out there entirely at my expense, paid the hotel, and just served them for a weekend and blessed them. They're struggling. It's a little church. They only had 12 people, counting me, when I was there. And some people say, well, that's just a waste of time, Jay. Fly all the way from Omaha, Nebraska to Sacramento and minister at a little tiny church and not get anything back for it. I go, it's not about getting stuff back. It's about sowing. It's about loving. It's about giving into the lives of others. It's about helping people. And many people have helped me along the way and blessed me, encouraged me, and served me, and just challenged me and inspired me and blessed me financially. And so I'm called to be a blessing. So are you, and I enjoy doing that. So maybe that'll just, even there, that'd be a good place if we were done the show, we could stop right there, but we're not. And so moving on, and so I had a radio program for a while, and then began to make other connections and wrote some books, and I'm on TV right now with y'all. And then I planted a church about 20, started to get the idea around 2012, I guess. Planted it in 2014 here, called Kingdom Encounters, and got a core group of people to come together and put together a church. And it was an amazing, magnificent, wonderful experience. Not without trials, not without difficulties. We had no people, we had no money. It wasn't, some of these big churches will launch another church and they'll send 250 people out, give them, $50,000. They go plant a church, sometimes more, give them $100,000. I've heard of up to $200,000. And we didn't have a penny to our name, but God opened up doors all over the place and brought me people. And my one prayer in planting a church was to God, I said, I want it to be multicultural. I don't want to pastor an all-white church or an all-one-race church. And so, fortunately and blessed, it was a blessing. We had blacks, Hispanics, Koreans, and whites together initially, and then it grew from there. And again, I think heaven's going to be like that. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised in heaven that there's going to be all these cultures up there, because everybody thinks they're the only ones who are going to be up there. And that's not true. Everybody thinks that, but a lot of people do. They think their own denomination's the only one that's going to be up there. Their own culture is the only one that's going to be up there. And it's like, no, I don't think so. At least that's not what I see in the Bible that I read. And the Bible I read has a multiplicity of cultures and people and ethnicities and rich and poor and dark skin and light skin and medium skin color and so on. It goes. And it's just a diversity of people, and I believe that with all my heart. And that would include you. You're watching today, and I don't know who you are and what your culture or background is, what your nationality is, what your denomination is, if you even have one. You might not be a church-going person. You might not have any denomination at all, and that's okay too, because I'm not super excited about all the denominations. I chose, when we planted the church, to be multi-denominational. And I thought multi was more inclusive and non-denominational was exclusive. So we were very careful about the wording we used, and multi-denominational just seemed like a better term for us. Non-denominational for somebody else would be perfect. It wouldn't be perfect for me. So anyway, we planted this church, we got it up and running and got a building, and people were coming, and got up to about 100 or so people, and then we lose some because we didn't have enough room for kids ministry, and then we gain and we lose, and we didn't have enough room for parking, and we gain and we lose, and we kind of had this ebb and flow up and down. And it's kind of that way today, even traveling, and up and down. So it's just a matter of trusting God. We have ups in our life and we have downs in our life. We have just things that bring us great joy, and other times things that bring us great sadness. And that's part of directions. That's part of walking day-to-day life, not knowing exactly what's going to happen next. None of us are guaranteed another day. It's a blessing when we have it. I've been here now, I'm in my 26th year. I was thinking about it this morning. I've had a lot of friends die here, including my first wife. She died here. And that was a hard season, and very difficult to navigate. She was sick for 5 years, got progressively worse, went in the hospital for 150 some days, was getting ready to come home on Thanksgiving Eve, and then the unthinkable happened. I mean, she'd gone through so much stuff and was so sick. They wrote it in her chart that she was going to die. And then, but she got well, she beat the odds, and God was with her, and she went to rehab, and she's getting better, and she was 1 day short of coming home, and then she got COVID in the hospital. You're not supposed to get COVID in the hospital. But I saw so many things in the hospital that were just I shouldn't have seen them. There were just things that just were unhealthy. And I'm not blaming that hospital, because it was a trying time for the world at that time. It wasn't just that hospital. COVID was hitting the whole world, and we didn't know how to respond. A lot of people didn't know how to respond, so I get that. But I still saw a lot of unhealthy things, and I questioned them from time to time. And anyway, she passed and went on to heaven on January 3rd of 2021. And that was a very hard season for me, and I took a sabbatical to try to get my head together, and went around to different folks I knew around the United States and stayed with them and talked and prayed, and went to her side of the family and talked and prayed, and came back, decided that I could be at home without her, but I couldn't be at church without her. And so I gave the church to my son Jason and another young man named Brett. So it was Jason and Brett, and they were pastors. It was Pastor Brett and Jason, you know, PB and J, and not peanut butter jelly, but pastors Brett and Jason, and they took the church, did a good job with it for a season, and things changed for them too, and ultimately the church kind of closed. And in the meantime, I was invited to be on staff at a local church here in town, and that was a surprise to me. I was just out visiting churches to find a new church home. After all, I've been in 156 churches. I figured I could just visit some of them and find the right place to attend, and I visited this one in town called King of Kings, and they invited me to be on staff part-time and do their prayer ministry, and I could still travel as I wanted to. And it seemed like a win-win situation because they needed help in the area of prayer ministry, and it provided me extra income as I'm restarting traveling. It's not easy to restart, and it's certainly not easy to start something right after COVID. And a lot of churches are struggling and hurting financially, and attendance had dropped and so on. We know that. So, but I decided, I felt like God was in it, and I joined this church staff. And that was in December of 2021. And then in April of 2022, 5 months later, I did my first seminar. It was called Anointed to Pray. And a lot of people came out to it, and this young lady named Rebecca came to it, and all the situations around that, she shouldn't have come that day. This life for her wasn't going real smoothly at that point. She was taking care of her mom, but it worked out because her sister was in town for her to come. And she came to the seminar, and at the end of the seminar, I had prayer ministry. And talk about a directional change. I had prayer ministry, as did 3 other pastors in that area of that church, and you could have gone to any one of the 4 or all 4 if you wanted to. And she went in my line, and there was 10 or 15 people in my line, and she came up, worked her way up, and I prayed over her, like I normally do, and then she asked if she could pray over me. And I'll be real honest, I almost always say no. And the main reason I do that is because I can get prayer anytime. I'm there to give, I'm not there to receive. And simultaneously, there's all these people in line. There's 10 or 15 people in line. If I pray for 3 minutes for each person, the last person in line is going to be at least an hour before they get up there. Felt like God nudged me and said, let her pray. I said, okay, I let her pray. And she prayed the most beautiful prayer. She prayed that Jesus would take a bouquet of flowers to my wife in heaven from me. That was it. And I was like, wow, nobody had prayed that kind of prayer for me. And even back when Diane first died, and all the men that surrounded me and other families that surrounded me, and people that were just all friends and tight, and nobody had prayed any kind of prayer like that, and it grabbed my attention. I had had 7 prophetic words that I get remarried, and I'd been on a few dates, but none of them were the right ones, and then I went months without any dates, and then I met Rebecca, and I began to get just a little bit interested in this girl, this young lady, and I say young lady because she's a little bit younger than me. And then 2 days later, I had a mild heart attack. And I won't go into all that, but I texted her. I found out who she was from the hospital when the pastors came to visit me, and I texted her. And well, I actually had messengered her on Facebook. I didn't have her phone number. And then after 2 weeks, we texted. And after a week later, I asked her out on Easter Monday, and we went out on our first date. And the rest is history. There's a lot more to it than that, but we dated for a while, and we got engaged, and as I sit here today, we've been married almost 2.5 years. That's a directional change. I wouldn't have thought I'd get remarried after my first wife passed away. I've been married for 42 years. Kind of get used to doing things a certain way, and you think you can only love one person, and you discover you can love more than one, and God's working in your life. It brought change and directional change and compassion and love from somebody I didn't know it was possible. You know, somebody told me once, they said, if you ever get remarried, you'll love your second wife different than you loved your first. Well, that's true. Here's the compatibility statement of that is also true. Your second wife will love you differently than your first wife did. And so there's all this give and take and learning and growing, and Rebecca and I have grown together, and we deeply love each other, and I'm so glad to be with her. And that's a directional change. And so here we are now, 46 years. 46 years in ministry, it's amazing. I don't plan to stop. I'm 68 as I share this, and I'm just going to keep on going. Lori's given me at least 12-year plan. So 12 and 46, at least go to 58 years. and maybe 2 more past that, 60. Who knows what God has planned, but I never planned to retire. I never made those kind of commitments in my life. I mean, I did some IRAs and different things, but just plan to keep going as long as God will allow me to keep going. Retirement seems to be an American culture, but not a biblical one. And so, at least for me, I thought, well, I love what I'm doing. I'd rather preach the word and travel and write books and do TV shows like this and pray for political leaders like I do than sit around the house and garden and plant flowers and put some artificial flowers here just as a representative of that this morning. But I'd rather do that than